Hey everybody, I'm Greg Sowell and this is Why Am I, a podcast where I talk to interesting people and try and trace a path to where they find themselves today. My guest this go around is Jeni B. This lady is a machine. She's a single mother of 2 teenage girls, which honestly I think is probably her most proud accomplishment. She is a career TV producer, writing instructor, and an awesome podcast host and producer, and truly just an all-around good human. Having found her through her podcast, I have to say that she gives some definite production goals for folks like me. She covers some heavy topics with the effortless precision and grace of a ballet dancer. I want to be as accomplished and humble about it as Jeni when I grow up. I hope you enjoy this chat with Jeni B. Jeni B, thank you for joining me on the Why Am I podcast.
I'm so happy that you asked me to be part of this. It's so fun. I'm excited.
Oh my gosh, you're an amazing liar, and I appreciate every syllable of that. I'm gonna listen to that on a loop. So what? I know I usually go into this thing really quick, but I'm just curious. Why do you call yourself Jeni B instead of Jeni Bestworth?
Oh, that's such a great question. It's been asked in my life, but not for a very long time. So I haven't had to answer this in a while. So when I was 16. Growing up in a small town, everybody got their license right away when they turned 16. This is not something that you waited for. There was no public transit, so everybody wanted to have a car. And my mom, as a birthday present for me, got me a license plate, a personalized license plate. This was brand new back then, and I think it cost like $200. Like, it was really expensive because it was new. Nobody was really doing it. It was like, this is a thing. You can put something on a license plate. So she got me a license plate, and a lot of my friends called me Jeni B. And so she put Jeni B on my license plate. And so for years, I drove around with this on my car, and it stuck. And so much so that when I moved to Toronto and I started working in television, that's just what everyone called me. And in the credits, when people's names roll in the credits, mine say Jeni B. My last name barely ever gets used. And one of my best stories, funny stories from one of my bosses, I'd been working at a show for, a few years, and we were quite close. And we were sitting around talking and having a meeting about something. And he said, Jeni B, wait, what's your last name? Like, it just occurred to him they didn't actually know my last name. So yeah, it's just Jeni B. And my kids' friends call me Jeni B. Like, I'm probably too old for it now, actually, but it's just something that stuck and it's never really gone away.
Got you.
So I rolled with it.
So you're named for a car. I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. All right. So, man, you are so easygoing. I love this. So generally when I start this thing, I don't like the idea of like giving introductions to people because that's me telling their truth, and that is not the truest of the truths that could be. So I like to say that we are somewhere. So you and I, do you guys have Krispy Kreme donut shops up there?
We do have. Okay. I just said to a friend this morning, I'm jonesing for a Krispy Kreme
donut.
donut.
So you and I are at Krispy Kreme. They told us that the red light's going to come on in 15 minutes, right? So we're waiting on those fresh donuts. The one I go to will actually sling you one right off the line and let you eat it. So we're chilling there. We're waiting. We're bull chiving. We talk about me and what I do for a second, blah, blah, blah. It's boring. We exhaust that very quickly. So now it's your turn to reciprocate. So who are you?
Oh my goodness. Geez, maybe I prefer someone telling me who I am. Who am I? Well, the first thing comes to, I'm a mom. I'm a mom. I didn't think I'd ever be a mom. I didn't know if I'd ever have kids. Of course, growing up when you're in your 20s and you're having the time of your life, it really wasn't a thought that I had in my head. And now I'm a single mom to 2 really awesome girls. And I'm much more than that, but it's the first thing that comes to my mind because we're a really tight threesome. The 3 of us are, it's us against the world kind of thing, or with the world, I should say. So that is the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm the daughter of 2 people that were amazing, that really showed us what it was like to be kind and live in a small town and be courteous and lovely to your neighbor and to get to know people. I'm a storyteller, and I come by that very honestly from my parents and all of my siblings. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. There were 7 of us that would grow up in one floor house in a little teeny town on top of a hill. And it was a really special upbringing. I'm a television producer, I'm a writer, and I'm a podcaster.
So at this point, their face is slack. They don't even know what to say back. I mean, that is a lot. That is a mouthful. How is it possible that one human can do all of these things?
Well, you're making me feel amazing because sometimes I wake up and go, what have I done with my life? So it's nice to have a reminder that, yeah, maybe I've done a couple of things. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I've lived a lot of years. So I guess cumulatively over the years, you find things and you become things and you are things. Um, Geez, I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah,
There's a 24 hours in the day, and I definitely use them up. I would say that.
that's cool. I never use them as effectively as I would like to. But when we're talking about your accomplishments, yeah, on LinkedIn, you scroll and you scroll and you scroll and you scroll, and eventually the wheel on your mouse falls off. You've been out there, you've done a lot of stuff. It's pretty awesome.
Does it seem braggy, Greg? Is it braggy?
No. I to be honest, I look at LinkedIn as like a living resume. So in my mind, you should put absolutely everything on there, right? You know, because the first thing somebody does when they're going to work with you is what? They Google you and they find your LinkedIn and they check you out. So it's like, why wouldn't you put all that stuff in there? It's absolutely
Right,
not.
of course.
And to me, you're just writing something in a history book, right? You're not, spinning tall tales or anything like that. That's just it. And I have learned that people are comprised of everything they've done in their lives, all the decisions they've made. Somebody I heard the other day, maybe an unsavory guy, but the way he put this is he said, you're born looking like your parents, right? And the question was posed to him. It's like, what personality traits do you still have from your parents or something like that? And he was saying, you're born looking like your parents, but you die looking like all the decisions you've made in your life. And I was like, wow, that's a beautiful way of, it's really, man, that was deep. It took
Is deep.
I had to ponder that for a little while. So like, that's the way I look at it, right? It's like, you are just an amalgam of all of the things and experiences and people you've run into. So yeah, I think, man, you gotta read off your rap sheet like that. You just gotta let everybody have it all for sure.
I appreciate that.
The first thing you said, that's interesting. You think of yourself as a mom first, like as like a unit. I guess, did you think of you and your daughters as a single being now? Just like we are the bees? I don't know, you don't say
Maybe.
best wife
We
anymore.
we call ourselves the three Bs, and sometimes we call ourselves we three, and we're a package deal.
We
That's what I
three.
always tell people. We're a package deal. I remember my mom saying to me one time that she thought her biggest accomplishments in life and her best accomplishments in life were her 5 kids. And I remember at the time, I was probably in my maybe 20s or early 30s. I remember kind of like, ugh, like rolling my eyes and thinking that was a really lame answer. And what else have you done in your life? And that can't be the thing.
Mm.
Of course, knowing nothing, like
Yeah.
I'm,
Well,
an idiot kid at that
she
point.
said 5 kids, but there's actually 6. So there was one of you she wasn't proud of. She just didn't want to say
That's
who.
right,
Is that right?
exactly. So no, there is 5. Did I say 5 siblings before? Did I say I have 5 siblings?
I thought you said 7 early.
There's 7 in total, a family. Sorry, parents and 5 kids.
Oh, okay.
So that was my bad. Yeah, so I'm the youngest of 5 kids. So, but maybe there was someone that she was not speaking about. But yeah, I remember her thinking that, or saying that, and me thinking that wasn't who she was. Like, you're just who you are because of your children. And now I get it. I totally understand it, because I am still my own entity, and I'm not a person because of them. And I have a very separate life from them, actually. And if I had never had them, I know that I would have had a very full and fulfilling and wonderful life. I say that all the time. I have lots of friends that don't have kids, and I don't think there's any one way that's good or right or better or anything. But I think because of our situation, because it is just the 3 of us, I'm raising them completely on my own. I think it's 2 girls. So there's a tightness there, and there's a closeness that we have that is really, I'm so grateful for it. I don't, without being, overly mushy, they really have become such a huge part of my life since, I think since it was just the 3 of us. I'm actually, I'm not happy that I got divorced. I'm not happy, that maybe they don't have a dad, that's around in their life, but I think that what we have and what we've, made from that situation, I am really happy for that
Mm.
and really grateful for that. So yeah, I guess mom just, and they're in my world big time right now because one is 12 and a half and one is 15 and a half. And so we're in it, right? So maybe if you ask me that question in 5 years when everyone's left the house, I might have a different answer. But in this moment right now, yeah, that's the first thing that came to my head for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I've got a 13 and a 16-year-old. They're both boys
Mhm.
though, so it's
Right.
a different set of problems.
It
Problems
is,
still,
yeah.
but a different set. Yeah, so I did that.
Yeah.
Do you think that cohesion you guys have, that like single unit, do you think that's a lot of that is born out of the fact that you're a single parent and it's like you just literally can't do everything, even though you are doing everything, you have to do everything, right? It's like, I think in those single parent situations, the kids have more responsibilities and they can kind of see where they fit in and um, become more part of the unit, right? It's like I have an important role to play in, and I'm doing. Do you think that kind of informs your kids a little bit more?
I wish that they were more responsible. I wish that was a true statement. I think that there is definitely things and aspects where they would have to step up in a different way than, someone being raised by two parents. But then I also know lots of two parent situations that, you know, they are just being raised by one
Yeah.
parent, or, that's an unhealthy
Mm.
situation. So and that's to say that one is better, they're also different. We're also different in our situations. But I think that what has come from it is a real sense of empathy towards people's situations because they know that the way that they're being raised and their life is very different than other people's, or is different than some other people's. Not, divorce is it's pretty common nowadays, unfortunately. But I think by the sheer fact that it's just the three of us, there's an empathy that comes with that. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but I see that in both of them, that they have giant hearts
Mm.
and they're very empathetic to everybody's family and life situation. And I don't know if that's because they've been asked questions in the past, like, where's your dad? Or what, who's like, those kinds of things. So they've had to sort of think about what that means to them. And I would also say that um, because we're a house of three girls, that there is a real awareness to women's rights
Mm.
and women in the workforce and women doing a lot of jobs and, coming of age and like all those things, because it's an open book in this house. We are talking far more than I ever did when I
Mm.
was growing up. And I know that's a different time,
Mm-hmm.
so that's no like shade to my mom, but um, yeah, there's no conversation that is off limits. And trust me, sometimes I regret that decision because I get one of them coming at me and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is this going to be? Like, I don't really want to talk about this right now, but I do, and we hunker down. And so I think that there's a real awareness and an appreciation. I think that's a sign of the times for sure, but I do think it's also probably being raised by a single mom is part of that.
Mm. Yeah, so in my household growing up as well, uh, there wasn't a lot of sharing of feelings and thoughts and emotions, and it just like that didn't exist. And like I learned at a very early age that feeling things is dangerous. So you have to like protect yourself. You have to like so it's
Right.
and so now yeah, it's like a 180 with my kids. And what's so funny is like I never wanted to have kids. I was the
Right.
people in the movie theater complaining when I saw little kids walking in, or
Same. 100%
or the
same.
kids sitting next to me at the restaurant. It's like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I never wanted them. And to be perfectly honest, my wife did, so we had kids. And even when she
Mhm.
was pregnant, I was like, I felt nothing. But I know it's a different experience for a woman, being pregnant. For
Sure.
one, you've got all these amazing hormones that encourage you to want to nurture and all those things. But also for me, it was like I was watching something on TV. It's like it wasn't real
That's
until
right.
it got here, because I was so worried. I was like, am I even gonna like this thing? I was like, I don't even really
Hmm.
like the cat. Am I gonna like this kid?
Right. Yeah.
And I ended up, obviously loving my kids, and um, I found unconditional love for the first time. Like that's
Mm.
what I found there. And I was having a conversation with my kids one time about it, and I was telling them how they're the only time in my life I have and never will have unconditional love. And they're like, well, mom loves you like that. And I go, think so? And they go, yeah. I was like, well, what happens if I go and have an affair with somebody else? Is mom still going to love me? And they're like, oh, yeah. And yeah. I was like, so it's different, you know?
Yeah, it is different. It's not something I ever imagined, and I now understand what my mom was talking about, because that also happens, is that you realize later when you do it, or as you get older, like, what they were speaking about, what they were feeling. But yeah, it is definitely, it is crazy. It is not something I imagined that I could, yeah, ever feel. I feel the same way as you do. And it is unconditional for sure. And that sense of wanting to protect
Oof.
and that's a fun thing that I did never expect to have, a feeling about either, that mama bear thing that comes out, or whatever it is, and just wanting to keep them safe. And I thought, after you kept them alive for the first few years, I thought I was really like out of the woods. I thought, okay,
Yeah.
great, smooth sailing, we're doing great. And then we got to high school and into teenage years, and it's a whole set of other things. I'm like, oh my God, no, now this is the time I have to keep them alive.
Yeah.
Like, this is actually scarier and harder than it was when they were a toddler. Anyway, that
Oh,
no one really warns you
I
for
get that. Yeah.
that.
It was so terrifying at first. And then it's like, oh, this is all right. This is pretty easy. And now it's terrifying again.
Yes, exactly.
Especially
Until you die.
both of them right in that, like that dangers. I mean, they're right. Oh my gosh. Like you're in the same boat. You're like the same age
Yes.
gap. And so they're both like meandering into, I heard somebody describe it as having children is like taking your heart out of your chest and telling it to go play in traffic. And that's what I feel
That's
like I'm
right.
doing every day with them, like sending them off to like high school, especially in the crazy world we live in right now, you know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can't protect them from everything. I guess that's the one thing that I definitely learned, is that they're going to feel the emotions. They're going to have the crummy things happen to them. They're living in a world right now that is just so bizarre. My oldest started grade 9, started high school in the pandemic, and I just felt that was so unfair. But I had friends that kids graduated in a pandemic and didn't get their graduation from high school.
Mm,
So this is it's a tough time for everybody, but I think, yeah, for kids it's really, it feels very unfair. So trying to just, yeah, protect them and support them in the best way that you can, while also taking care of yourself. There's that too,
yeah.
which I think, especially as single moms, I think that's, and not to say take that away from anyone else, because I think it's hard for everybody, but I think that that's extra hard in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I grew up with a single mom, and I remember the days where she was working 2 jobs, and I mean, not like you're working like 8 jobs at any one point in
Not
time.
all at once, mind you, but
But yeah, like, yeah, it's a lot for any person to take on. It's
Mhm, for sure.
at any point in time, it's a lot for anybody to take on. One thing you
That's
were
right.
saying that kind of like sparked a little piece of curiosity in my mind was that you and your daughters have a lot of conversations, some of them unexpected, that you probably never anticipated having. And what makes me think about that there is, how do you deal with the conversations that you want to have, but they won't have with you? Because I remember like as a kid, well, I mean, I didn't have like a reciprocal parent that like actually talked about feelings, but if I wanted to, there was just certain things that I would never talk to them about. I wouldn't tell them, I wouldn't
Mhm.
ask them. And I know the same is true with my kids. And it's like, I want to have these conversations. They're important conversations, but it's never going to happen with me. And I see them talk to somebody else, and that somebody else will say the same thing that I've said 8 million times. And when they say it, okay, I'll do that now. And it just drives me crazy. It's like, how do you reconcile the idea that, there's these important conversations that I can't even imagine what that's like with daughters. Like sons, I don't know. They're a little bit more straightforward. You can kind of, I mean, they're
Mhm.
idiots. You can see what's going on inside their heads. They're transparent, but daughters, it seems like would be a little bit more complicated.
I think so. I think that high school and all of the hormones and the changing bodies and all of those things, and girls, and it is true, there are mean girls, but there's mean boys too.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily just for one gender. So I think that yes, there are definitely things that I might want to bring up that they don't want to talk about, but I'm very, very fortunate because they really do come to me for most
Oh,
stuff.
that's
So
awesome.
I know I have to, maybe that'll change. I don't know, knock on wood. I'm really, I'm so lucky. You know, they've even been teased by their friends. Like, do you have to tell your mom everything? I think they know, their friends know, like, if they're going to tell them something, there might be a chance that I'm going to hear it. So, and like I said earlier, I honestly don't need to hear all of it. Like, there's some stuff I just, and usually those conversations started around 11 o'clock at night, 10:30, 11. I'm like, I'm there all day long. Just come and tell me. And you've got an open window. But the big conversations tend to really happen at
Yeah.
nighttime, late at night. I don't know why that is. But anyway, I'll take it when I can. If I'm falling asleep, I might have to put a, pause button on it. But I'm lucky. They do have a little joke that, sometimes they'll come and just tell me something that they think is funny, or they think is, it's just something that's happened. And they will debate whether or not they feel like getting a lesson along with it, because maybe they just want to come and tell me something that's not that it's not nice, but maybe it's just a little bit too jokey for my liking, let's say, about something or somebody, and I will hear it, and then I'll bring it around to a lesson. And they're like, why does everything have to be a lesson? So I think those are definitely the moments where they question whether or not they want to tell me something. I think they 9 times out of 10 they tell me anyway, and then they'll just suffer through the lesson part of it. But yeah, I am pretty lucky, and I know that I'm lucky, and I do not take it for granted.
Mm. So you touched on it a teensy bit. I heard you mention it earlier, because from like listening to your podcast, which I'm sure we'll get into here in a minute as well, it seems like growing up in a small town really informs a lot of who you are, right? I guess it's the kind of the foundation upon which you are built. So tell me about growing up in a small town. Was it Meaford? Is that how?
It was Meaford,
Okay.
yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. It is, I say that town, and growing up there in a small town, and in my family situation as well, but it really made me who I am today. And I know that not everybody has beautiful small town experiences, and I've heard a few of my own, even from, when I was growing up. But from my personal experience, I can't imagine. I can't imagine anything else. I'm now raising my girls in the city, and I've had many moments where I think I've made a giant mistake and that I should like immediately pack our bags and get us to a small town. But for me, I think the special part for my personal experience was that my dad owned a general store that was attached to our house. So we were at the top of a hill. So there was sort of the top of the hill, and then there was the bottom of the hill. And the bottom of the hill was sort of Main Street and the town and the harbor. We grew up on the water, which was really
Mm.
lovely. So it was a beach town. We also had an army base still there in our town. So a lot of people that were training for the military would come to Meaford and stay at the army base there. So we were a town of 4,000 people at the time. It's grown a lot since then. But in the summer, it would, double in size because of people that were coming to be at the beach, people that would come and camp out, and then, of course, the army base. So we were around lots of different types of people. But I think growing up in my house and in my store with my dad, being the person that he was, it was a meeting place for tons of people. I tell 1,000 stories about this. I won't tell them all, but, people came to just hang out there. The story that I tell is that on Mondays and Wednesdays from 1 to 3, my dad would close the store. Everybody knew it. And he would go downtown and do his banking. I don't know why it took 2 hours, but he was visiting people. He was part of town council, so he'd stop in at the town hall. He would go to every bank. There was 3 banks, and he would go visit all of the tellers. He just was the man about town. And school ended, and he was supposed to be back at 3, and that store was supposed to be open. But you would come home from school on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I remember rounding the corner and sort of like, cringing and holding my breath, hoping that he had made it back. And generally, I would say at least half the time, Dad was not back yet. But so that meant that you had to open the store. But it also meant that there was people sitting in their cars in the parking lot waiting for him to come back. Now, who would do that? Would you go sit
Wow.
in the convenience store parking lot and wait for the owner to come back and open the store? No, of course not. You'd go to the other convenience store. So we'd go in and I'd be like, oh, and I did never wanted to open it for many reasons. I just didn't want to work in the store. And the second reason was people would come in and go, hey, Brett. And they go, oh, is your dad not here? Like no one was happy to see you. They only wanted to come and see dad. So that's just a small example of what he created. So I think I was around a ton of different people. I was around, he called everybody brother. That was his thing. And so then they started calling him back, that back. He was very, very generous to people in the town. If people were short on cash, he'd just let them take it. He started so many things in that store that I witnessed. And so that combined with small town mentality is everybody is your neighbor. You help when you can, you old people are revered, senior citizens are, because there's a lot in small towns because that's where you would go to retire and settle down. And so I think it was just a cross section of people. And I think that the underlying philosophy there is that you are kind and you are a good neighbor and you are generous. And I think that's probably the greatest gifts that I got from being there.
That's interesting. So, man, you have a reverence. I don't know if you've ever noticed it when you talk about your dad. Like, your cadence seems to slow a little bit. You just, there's something there. It sounds like so much of you, like I've been burning down your podcast for a little while we've had this scheduled for a while. And so, I've had the opportunity to listen to a lot, and it does sound like one of the things you're most proud of. And it seems like you try and, pass on to your girls is kind of that, empathy is a big one, and, generosity, trying to take care of others and seeing that in others. Do you think this is sort of you carrying forward a legacy for your dad, in a way that he'll be able to live on forever, sort of through this, passing of the torch, the small town torch, I guess, as it were?
It almost made me cry. That's really nice. That's such a nice way of thinking it. I would also say that my dad was a bit of a pill sometimes too. Like my siblings who are older than me have very different stories about growing up with my dad. There's 15 and a half years between myself and my oldest brother. And his relationship to my dad was very different than the baby 15 years later. I just want to be clear about that. So there was hard parts to my dad. I think that you either loved him or you hated him. He was on town council. He was super opinionated. But at the core of who he was, and I do believe how he was remembered, was that kindness. And maybe that is something that I'm just, in the back of my head, it was ingrained in me. But I think also, yes, having him live on, he died when I was 21, and he was such a big part of that town. There was a full page in the paper when he passed away. There's 4,000 people in the town and 1,100 people showed up at his funeral. Like that's
Wow.
not nothing, a quarter of the town. So he brought something to that town. And I think, I for sure want to keep that going in whatever way. And I don't know that it was purposeful necessarily, but I think for sure that was because of him. And absolutely a little bit for him and my mom. Whenever I post a story on Facebook is sort of where my childhood people are. That's where my high school friends are and my public school friends. And whenever I post a story on there or a photo of my parents on there, it is without a doubt the thing that gets me the most comments. And I have heard stories. He died when I was 21. That is a long time ago. People still tell me stories that I've never heard before. Stories of when they went into the store, something he did for them that they've never forgotten. Like that, gosh, if we could all go out of this world that way, like that, I think is the biggest thing for me. Just leave the earth better than how you found it, in whatever way that is. His was a small little way in a store on a hill in a little town, but people are still talking about him over 25 years later. That is no joke. So if I could have even a quarter of that, my goodness, I would be very, very lucky person.
I think it's I've talked to people before that, they were talking about what legacy they're going to leave, and I've had people say, I never did these great, if you're not Einstein, are you going to really be remembered as a scientist? You know what I mean? Like if you're not Alan Turing, are you really going to remember, as code breaker or what, it's like some people do great, big, amazing things and they're remembered for that. Right. So it's like, what legacy am I going to leave? But a lot of these people, not unlike yourself, are storytellers, and they slowly make these gentle nudges in people throughout their lifetime. And it's an invisible legacy of just moving these people towards being a little bit better, just tiny little bits, right? And what they say is, like, if you have two lines that are seemingly parallel, but only a slight angle, a slight augmentation, for the first 10 miles, you can't tell anything. But once you get, a lifetime of distance away, you can see how much you've moved that person. And I think it's amazing when people go out of their way to, try and put a little bit of good out there, try and make a little difference here and there. Like, to me, that gets me every time.
Yeah, me too. I think it's super important. And the tagline of my podcast is everybody has a story, because I think that's what I learned the most in my dad's store. Every single person that came in there to spin a yarn with him or to complain to him or to tell him a funny story. It's the first time I heard real big adult laughter where I was like, what is so funny? Like, I don't get it. But they, so every emotion happened in there, and I saw all types of people, and I thought, yeah, everybody's coming from something. We're not all the same. It's what I tell my girls all the time. Like, whatever reason why someone's acting a certain way, it's coming from somewhere. And so if, we can just remember that and move through our day with as much kindness as possible, I think we would be okay.
Yeah. It's funny. You follow a pattern of other really great storytellers that I've talked to. So one, when he grew up, his mom owned the beauty salon in town. And so he'd go up there and he would sit there and he would just listen. He'd listen to people talk all day long. And the other one, I believe his dad owned a general store in town. And so he would just sit there and listen to people talk all day long. And they are the most amazing storytellers I've had on here. And here you are, you were in a general store. Let me guess, you were listening to people tell stories and talk all day long. There's something.
Isn't that fascinating? Well, first of all, that's such a compliment. Thank you. And I did. I sat on the 3 little stairs that went from the store to the house, and it was the doorway. It was right behind the meat counter and the slicer, and he was down sort of to the left, and I could sit there and no one would even know I was there. And I could just sit and listen, or he'd have me doing chores in the store and, you're listening. And whether you're actually really listening, because maybe it's boring adult conversation, right, but trust me, it's getting in. And I think that, yeah, you're right. One of our, I believe, greatest storytellers, he's a friend of mine in Canada. He's a former Much Music VJ, and now he has his own show on Apple, and he's heavily into music, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful person. He's a Canadian celebrity. His name is George Strombolopoulos, and he is one of the best storytellers I've ever known. And he was raised by a single mom. I'm fully ripping off his story here, but it's important to what you're saying because it's true. He was raised by a single mom, and she worked 2 jobs. And so in the summertime when they weren't in school, she needed to get the kids to go somewhere. And he tells a really amazing story about how she would drop them at the library in the morning. And they basically were told to go in and read and don't leave and just stay. She would get them at lunchtime and they'd go have a little, bag lunch in the park or whatever. And when she went back to her other job, she dropped them at the nursing home, at the retirement center, and said, go in and find someone to talk to. Now, I know you can't do that now.
Yeah, it's a little wild.
But they were like, what are you saying? He tells it so great. And anyway, he went in and that became his afternoons. A little kid in the summertime spending his afternoon with a bunch of old people. And that was where he believes he got his great stories from, listening in, talking to people who had lived a life, playing games, just being around in an environment where there's a lot of people telling their stories. So I think it seeps in. Yeah.
And something about that formula gives people the ability to, I guess, remember and recount stories in such a way. I don't know. I think it's interesting. So you said you had your father until you were 21. How old was he when he passed away?
He was only 66.
Only 66. That's
So he
pretty
was a
young.
lot older than me because I was the youngest, like I said. So when he had my oldest brother, he was 15. Let me think now. So how old would he have been when he had me? My mom, he was, yeah, in his 40s. So yeah, he would have been in his, started in his late 20s, early 30s with everybody else. And then I was definitely a happy accident. I came 6.5 years after the one that's closest to me. So, but yeah, so I didn't get a lot of time with him. He got sick when I was 18, and he was sick for about, 2.5 years. But the sort of joy that came from that, if I can spin it slightly, is that I stayed home with my mom. I didn't go off to school after high school. All my friends left and went to school, and I stayed home with my mom to help her take care of him. So I got a bit of a different dad in those 2 years that nobody else did. And it was hard, don't get me wrong. But I got to see him in a bit of a different light. And it was full time. It was full-time time with him. So that was, even though it was difficult, it was very special.
Mm. Do you think that when he passed, did that motivate you? Because I saw that you've done some, like you've backpacked through Europe a couple times, and you've had some crazy adventures and stuff like that. Do you think maybe informed you to like be, in the moment, be present, live a little more, take a few more chances?
Yeah, I definitely don't consider myself a chance taker,
Well,
but
you said yes to
I
this,
think
so pretty big
true.
gamble,
Well,
bud.
my new thing in the last year is say yes unless a no is required. That's Someone said that to me, and I really love that. So I'm really trying hard to do that. Um, yes, after he passed away, my mom and my brother and my one brother and my sister and I actually went off to Europe, and that was my first little backpacking stint I did with my brother. We went to the Netherlands, which is where my mom was born and raised. And so that was sort of the first of that. And then I loved it. I came home, I went to university, I dropped out because I will say I got there, and I think being in a classroom after having taken care of my dad for those 2.5 years, it's so silly. And I don't know, this would not be true. This is true just for me, maybe, but I felt so
Mm.
suffocated in that situation. And, I've been to the school of life, I used to say, which is so lame. But I just think when I got to school in that traditional sense, it was very hard for me to sit still. And that's when I started to actually have a little bit of anxiety. But what really helped me was, yes, doing the things and, going after some things that I knew that I really wanted to do. So then I did a second backpacking trip, and that was just pure joy. I have a million stories from that thing, and it was so special. I tell my girls all the time, if they ever do it, I even though I want them to take their phones, I also don't want them to take their phones because getting lost and having to figure out how to get around without GPS, and it was just so special. Getting lost was where I got found. I, met so many people in those moments of ending up somewhere where I didn't think I was supposed to. So yeah, I think for sure it, made me a little bit more, willing to try and do things maybe that I wouldn't have if I'd gone on the straight path right after high school. And I do think about it a lot in that life is short. That comes up a lot in my mind because I lost him. Lost him, that's such a weird thing to say, because he died so, young, to me anyway, but he made such a big impact. So what can you do in the time that you're here? Because somebody can make that kind of impact on someone in just, 18 years of their life, then, that would be my thing that I would want to always try to take from him.
Hmm. Well, but you don't have 18 years. You have like 20 minutes when you're doing these podcasts and you're making impacts. So you put it in that
nice.
perspective. It's like he had an easy job of it. Like you're trying to make big moves. You're making big money moves in a short amount of time. And I gotta say, some of that stuff took me back a little bit. I know I'm jumping ahead, like talking about your podcast or whatever, but yeah, some of the stuff. Yeah, I don't care. I'm going to jump all around. I don't give a crap. Like in your podcast, you've done some really interesting ones and some really funny ones. I know there was ones where you talk to teenagers and you have, I mean, that's generally the format where you give a little bit, which I love, honestly love. I love conversations. I love hearing people talk and tell me stories. So I'm totally on board with this, but you'll give a little bit and you'll have other people talk, but you don't just stick to fun, safe subjects. Like you did one called This Is My Miscarriage, and man, that one hit me pretty hard. You know, I was like, wow. How do you decide to do, like in particular that one, how do you decide to do, because that's scary to me. That's scary and vulnerable. I know there's a little bit of safety because it's produced. You're writing it out so you can get just as close as that line as you are comfortable with and not go over it. Right. But then, you know, you're also allowing other people to share their stories, and they may go to some place that's wholly uncomfortable for you. It's like, how do you get ready for that? How do you decide to do something? Like, where do you muster the courage for that?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's so kind for you to say that it's courageous. I think, well, first of all, I think that everything is a subject, so everything can be a story. So I've said this before, but my brother's always very concerned that I'm going to run out of topics, but I don't think that I will, because everything can be a story. So I can always start there. I can start with, you know, and then do I have a story? Do I have something that I can contribute? And I won't be able to necessarily have a personal story for every topic that comes up, but pretty much, you know, if you've lived a life, there's something, someone's either told you a story or you've heard a story, or, you know, I think it's all in the way that you, tell it. I've been really lucky so far. Every topic that, you know, I've covered, I've had something to say about it. And then for the depth of it, you know, sometimes people come to me, and it was one of the women that shared their story that had written me a couple months prior and said, I really want to tell my story about miscarriage. And I had had a miscarriage myself, and I agreed. I really don't turn much away. In all of the stories, I've had 313 guests and 313 stories in 2 seasons. And there's only one person that I asked them to just slightly change their story, because it was just a little raunchy not change their story, tell a different story, because it was a bit raunchy and I'm open-minded. I love a good raunch. But it was not, I know my audience, and it just went to a different place. But he was wonderful, and he was absolutely willing to tell a different story. So yeah, I'm asking people to dig deep, and like you said, some of it is really light and it's fun and funny, and some of it is definitely heavier than others. And I am very much an open book. I don't tell every part, like you say. I get to produce exactly what I, you know, want to give. And there's lots of stories I have not told yet. I think people think that I've said it all and that I'm giving it all up, and I certainly haven't. I have things that I've not shared, and I may get to, and I may not. But I think that for me, because in the past, when I've shared certain stories, I've had 1 to 5 people come to me and say, me too. Thank you for telling that story. I relate to you. I think the miscarriage story is a very good example. I had never known anyone that had a miscarriage before. And then I went through it really secretly and privately for the most part. And then when I had kind of come up and over, and it was however long afterwards, and I started telling, you know, a couple friends or a couple people, I told my sister. So my sister knew, but she came back and said to me, you know, same. And then a friend said, yeah, me too. I couldn't believe how many people in my close circle had a miscarriage and never talked about it. And so I think that's the crux of all of it. If I speak about it and there's one person that feels closer to somebody, and not just me, that's why I have guests on the episodes, because my story may not resonate with you, but maybe guest number 3 will resonate with you. And I think that's how we feel less alone. And I think that's how people feel connected to other people. So that's really the base of it. And that's how I get to the place. That's how I get the courage to do it.
What's more satisfying? You know, what releases more dopamine in your brain? Whether it's somebody who says, I really relate to that story that you told, or, hey, that person you had on there, you know, you acting as a facilitator really resonated with some person. Like, so what do you think does it more, like your personal story or the facilitation piece?
Oh gosh, I think both are just so special, and I got a message. I was having a really bad day last week and I got a message from somebody out of the blue, and she had been following me on Instagram. She'd even bought some merch from me, but she'd never listened to the podcast. And she decided in 2022 that she wanted to get off her phone a little bit more and be a little bit more connected to people in whatever way she could in these COVID times. And she decided she wanted to sort of, branch out a little bit in how she connected. And so she started listening. And she'd only listened to the first two episodes. And she she told me that she hadn't seen her parents in 3 years, and it was partly
Mm,
because of COVID. But then, we all get a little bit sort of complacent and maybe a little bit lazy, and maybe it's an excuse. And we can travel in Canada now, but she
mm.
just hadn't done it. And she said after she listened to the first two episodes, she immediately went and booked a flight out to see her parents. And I literally burst into tears, because so that was my story, but it was also other people's stories. We were talking about our parents in those episodes, and I got a huge rush
Mm.
of emotion from that, gratitude that she shared it with me, but just I felt so happy and proud that I had put something out into the world, that somebody motivated somebody to do something like that. Like what? You're right. That's a rush. And sometimes, I talk about this on the podcast, the helper's high. When you help somebody else, who feels better, the person you helped or you? And sometimes I feel guilty about that. Like, why am I doing this? Am I doing this so I can feel like amazing? But what's wrong with that? You feel good for helping. They ended up, feeling amazing for being helped. And
Mm.
I think everybody wins. So yeah, I feel really great when that happens. It's
Mm.
why I keep
Yeah,
making it.
and I've argued with people about this before, and we may argue now, but I don't believe there is such a thing as a selfless act, because whenever I do something for somebody else, it makes me feel good. But I don't think there's anything wrong
Yeah,
with that. That's a win-win, right? Yeah. Yeah. It helps
absolutely.
you, helps me. It's
100%.
like, how can that be bad? How could that be wrong? Yeah.
It can't. Yeah,
But it sounds like
absolutely.
maybe the most maybe the most special piece, or the piece that feeds you the most, is that feedback when you see that you've made a real human connection with somebody, when you've sparked something there. Does it make you feel tied to that person? Does it make you feel closer to that person? Maybe just even if for a second in this life we live, you can feel that, is that maybe what that is?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have very full and intimate conversations with people on Instagram that I will probably never meet in this lifetime. You know, People that I really truly feel
Mm,
are my friends, because of the conversations that we've shared about shared experience, or just by virtue of following each other, all these years on Instagram and liking each other's posts. And, people have watched my kids go from toddlers like to teenage girls. I mean, and they will never meet us. I have a friend, he is in California. I hope to meet him. I hope the next time I go to California, I get to meet him. But we talk to each other like old buddies, and he thinks he knows my girls, and he doesn't, and they don't know him. But it's something so, so, so special about that, especially in these pandemic years. We all
yeah. Didn't
deserve
you
to have
meet
that.
like one of your best friends through Twitter? I think
Oh,
I think
yes,
you
my
did
friend
like I think you
Sylvia.
did like an
Yes.
episode with her, right? And I love that one because
Yes,
it
I
was
did. That's
so
right.
smooth and so natural. You guys are such dorks together. It was a lot of fun to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah, another friend texted me afterwards, and he's like, I felt like I
Yeah.
was sitting
Yeah.
with the two of you. That's fun to do that with a friend. Yeah, we met on Twitter. She started following me because Dan Levy, yes, the Dan Levy, told her to. I worked with him a long time ago. He's a friend of mine, back in the day. And it was a funny thing. I just joined Twitter, and he was like, follow my friend Jenny B. And she was like, okay, I'll do what you say. And then from there, we started talking about The Bachelor of all things. And then she was coming to Toronto and said, I'm not a creep, and I want to meet you for coffee or tea, and will you meet me? And that's it. And then now she lives here, and we work together, and she's one of my best
That's so
friends.
cool. That's such a I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's meeting their significant others online these days. How is that any different, right?
Yeah, it's not any different. It's exactly what it is. And it does feel a little bit like a date, when you meet up with a friend from the internet. There's sort of that fun, butterfly, like
Oh, are you gonna
trepidatious
kill me or
feeling or
not?
what have
What's
you.
gonna happen?
It's like, yeah, exactly. I was like, are you gonna sing a white female this shit? I hope not, but she ended up being really cool. So I'm very
Oh my
lucky.
gosh, that's awesome. So you've done a lot of interesting, amazing things. I was digging around. I saw that you produced some MTV. This is completely off topic, but it cracked me up. You produced some like MTV Cribs Canada stuff, and so I just like searched out a couple of those. I was like, oh my god, you're the voice actor as well. Like, you're the voice host on that. Hilarious.
Well, that's Canadian TV for you. I mean, the Cribs in the MTV in the States, I think they had 60 people that worked on Cribs, and here in Canada we had like 5. I did most of the jobs. I produced it, I booked the talent, I story edited, and I directed on the day. And yes, I was the voice of Canadian Cribs.
Yeah, what
So
it's
silly.
funny because the voice I heard on Canadian Cribs is awfully close to the one I hear on the This Is It Actually podcast, right? So it's funny. It seems like a lot of the things you've done in the past have kind of led you to this crossroads here at this podcast thing. And I don't know if you feel like it's something really special. To me, I think it's you really shine. It's exceptionally well polished, and I know it's really just you putting all this stuff together. You ever thought about kind of the weird Plinko game that is your life that's led you here, and all these various things have kind of coalesced to be this amazing
Yeah.
producer? Because I mean, you do, like you talked about, television production as well as the podcast and stuff.
Well, it's funny because the podcast is like, it's the sort of realest and hardest job I've had that I don't get paid for. So then I don't feel like it's a job. When you're not being given a paycheck, you think, what is this? But it is a job and I love it. It is one of my favorite jobs. But yeah, I've never lined it up that way because it was sort of this side project that I was going to do that has now turned into this full-time beast that is, a really big part of my life. And when I was in high school, when I was asked what I wanted to do, I wanted to be on the radio. So you want to talk about full circle? I mean, I never got a job on the radio, never got a job in the radio. I was offered a daytime shift at a small local station up by my hometown, but I was already
Mm.
deep into television. I was a couple years into a job on Canada's only late night talk show. And I could go and move back home with my mom and go into this, radio station, which was my dream job, for something like, I think it was like 17 or $19,000 a year. And I would have had to leave the city. And so you got big dream and then sort of all these negatives. And then over here, I had this really cool job that I was embarking upon. My bosses offered me a different job, a better job, when they found out that I would be leaving, and they
Mm.
gave me a raise and I was going to stay in the city. So it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life, actually. And I've had moments where I thought, did I make the right decision? I mean, I know I did, because I ended up meeting my ex-husband on the late night talk show, which
Your
brings me
daughters,
to being
yeah.
a mom to these 2 children. So yes, it all worked out the way that it was supposed to. But I do laugh sometimes when I'm on that mic and I think, yep, I wanted to be in radio. And this is now just, I've just invented it, I guess. I've, made this show. Podcasting came along at the right time for me. I was a little late to it, but maybe there's no right time to start. The right time is the time that you do it. So yeah, I think that it has all led me to this point, and I hope that I can keep making it. I really love doing it, and I love the people that I've been connected to
Mm.
because of it.
What's your as far as the podcast goes, what's like your white whale? What's your Moby Dick? What's the big one you want to do, but maybe maybe it seems a little scary, or you're just not ready for it yet?
In
Sure.
terms of topic,
Or the direction you want to move with it, or anything.
well, a crazy thing just happened. in the last couple of weeks. I got signed to do the podcast as a digital series for a television station up here. So that's weird and wacky and not a
Oh, imagine that.
usual
The person
thing.
working in television for 20
And
years suddenly is doing something in television. Can't seem that crazy,
yeah,
right?
exactly. No, I guess not, but just because it's my own
It's your baby.
thing and it's the podcast being made into TV. So I guess, yeah, if you had asked me that maybe 6 months ago, I would have thought that would have been a really cool thing. So that's
It
happening,
is
which is
awesome.
really amazing. I think that I love doing the one-on-ones. I don't do them very often, but there are definitely some people that I would love to have come on as a one-on-one. I definitely have a dream list, and I think that I would love it to,
Mm.
keep growing, so that I can, have more people on it. Obviously, I would love to be able to keep making it. And I would love it to grow in a bunch of directions. So the TV thing is very cool. I'd love it to be
Hmm.
a book. Maybe that's crazy, but I imagine all of these stories, essay style, in a book that I feel like people, who love to read, that would be another avenue for them. And I'd love to get paid to
Yes,
make it,
yes, that
Greg.
was the question I was going to ask. Can you imagine a world in which you would be okay just doing, I mean, it's not going to be just I don't know, what do you want to call this? The universe? This is it actually universe? Like
Yeah.
just supporting that. Like, does that seem like crazy? Does that seem safe? Does that scare you a bit?
Yeah, it seems nuts. Like it seemed, no, and I should imagine it, because I know that when you imagine these things, and everything that I put on my vision board, lots of it comes true. I'm
Oh,
a vision board girl. I believe that the universe brings back to you what you put out. All of that, all of that. It is hard to imagine, I think, but I'm going to say it's not going to be hard to imagine. I think that it would
yeah,
be
it's
amazing.
coming
It
to
would
fruition.
be lovely to have some help. It would be wonderful. It came to fruition. Yeah, this is the job that I want to do. And this is the job I want to do. And I want it to pay my bills.
Not just feed your soul, but pay your bills.
Exactly. And it does feed my soul. And I feel so grateful for that. But yeah, the soul, they do say that if you do the things that you love, eventually, it takes you to the place where it's supposed to, in terms of bringing back to you what you need from it. So I don't want to ever feel ungrateful, because the stories are so much and so beautiful and so wonderful. But yeah, they don't put
That's
food
right.
on
They
my
don't feed
table.
my kids. They don't. Yeah, keep a roof over my head. I
Exactly.
get it. I get it. Like yeah, I very much understand that. Yeah. Like when I started
Mhm.
mine, I didn't fully understand why I was even really doing it. I mean, I've done a technical podcast for 10 years, right? But it's for nerds and, their ilk. And so it was very different than this, right? So I've kind of been doing this thing a long time, but this feeds me in a way that, one, I never expected it to. And two, I just had a conversation. So I've been at this about a year, like right at about a year, on this style one. And I was having a conversation with my wife about, you know, why I was even really doing it and what I've got out of it. And I
Mhm.
realized I make myself completely open, right? The thing that scared me the most, like, and was so dangerous most of my life, I do that now. And I do it with some incredible people. And I have learned so much about myself and learned how to interact with people better. But what's crazy is my wife and I were talking
Yeah.
about whenever you go and you do a job, you put on a uniform, whether it's visible or invisible, right? Sometimes you're always you, but shades of you, right? Like you're sort of different.
Mhm.
And I was saying, she was like, yeah, that's a very different person you are when you're doing this podcast. And I was saying, you know what? It's not that different from me anymore. Like I've learned to start moving towards that person. And I just started, my eyes just started just sobbing. I wasn't like losing it, but it made me realize that I am becoming more the person I wanted to be. I didn't realize that was my intention or my goal. But it's amazing. And through every person that's kind enough to say yes, it changes me in a significant way. And I don't know if other people hearing this make those adjustments. I don't know how you get such good feedback. It's much smaller for me, but that's awesome. Like, I think it's so cool. And it makes me sort of curious when other people, you start a podcast kind of, where you're collecting stories and you're getting it out there. Did you really have any goal for yourself? Like, this is what I want out of this, or did it just feel like this is something I want to do, I need to do, and you did it?
Yeah. So I had this blog and I was really doing that so that I could tell my stories. And that was really personal and a little bit, not selfish, but it was really for me. I just wanted to get my stories out there in whatever way. And then I had people say to me, this should be a podcast. And I was like, really? What is it? Like, I didn't, I couldn't really fathom it. And then it kept coming back, And so when it finally occurred to me what it was, because I had different ideas about what the podcast was going to be. And when I finally realized that it was actually just the blog in podcast form, in audio form, but with other people, when I had that light bulb moment, really for me, it was about being able to showcase all of these different types of stories. So my goal was always just to find amazing people so that other people could feel connected to them. And just keep finding great stories. And, it's not always easy. Like you say, it's a joy when someone says yes. I've definitely had people come to me and say, I want to tell my story. I've been really lucky that way. But, for every topic, I need to find 3 to 5 people for every episode. So it's not necessarily the easiest part of doing the podcast, but it is my favorite part. So my goal was always just get out as many stories as you can. Do you know it's an Instagram account. It's also a book. It's called Humans of New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always said that I kind of wanted it to be Humans of New York, but in audio form or in video form, just that snapshot of a person. Tell me the story like you're my friend and give me a little snippet of sort of this picture. And then other people listening will feel, connected to it. And so I guess I've accomplished my goal. If you asked me what the goal was, I think I did it, but I would like it to just, keep going and get bigger. Yeah.
And share your message, your feeling, connect more humans, just bigger audience. I love it. I dig it.
That's it. Yeah. Connecting humans. I think that's all it's not necessarily what people think that they need or want, but when it happens, you realize how important it actually is. And just being able to hear someone else's story humanizes somebody and helps us better understand other people.
I feel like most of us are just going through life waiting for somebody to see us.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Wow. That's profound. Yeah. And we're all stories. That's what I say. Margaret Atwood said that, we're all stories in the end. That's what it is. And so every part of what we do, every moment, every part of our day, even if we think it's nothing, it's something. And if somebody else can relate to that for even just a second, then we've done our jobs as humans.
That's heavy. That's good. I like that. All right, Jenny. Well, I'll tell you what, I definitely want to be respectful of your time. I know we are coming to a close here. So let me do the thing I always do at the end and say, is there any specific way you want people to, interact with you or interface with you out on the internets? Like what's your favorite place?
That's lovely. Well, I really am pretty active on Instagram. So Instagram is where I talk to people and people can find me, and it's at This Is It Actually. And I do have a website, and it's thisisitactually.com. And I've just launched a writing course,
right.
A 20-day writing workshop, which is kind of a fun way to connect as well. So there's, you can find the podcast there, and I've got a little bit of merch there, and then you can find the writing workshop. So yeah, I think those are the 2 best places for people to connect with me.
All right. And you said you also have people come to you and say, hey, I want to tell a story. How do people do that? Just through the website?
Yeah, they can do it on the website. There's a contact, and you can send it to my email, which is thisisitactually@gmail.com. Or people can send me DMs on Instagram. I check all my DMs, and there's lots of times where people will send me, an idea for a story. And I'm always so grateful if somebody wants to hop onto the podcast, or if they know somebody that has a really great story. I'm always searching, and I've showcased stories from people all around the world, and it's just such a special part of the podcast. So yeah, please connect with me.
That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, bud, you were so open and honest. I know this has got to be a little scary when you come on somebody else's podcast, right? Because, they're going to ask you uncomfortable things. So I really appreciate you, for one, saying yes, and two, just yes-anding everything I had to ask you. It was so amazing. And I love all of the positivity you put out there, all the kindness. And some of your topics are scary, but they're important. And it's like there's a weight to every single one of them. It's almost like whenever they start, it's like, this is something I need to hear, right? I may not get something from every single story, but there's always something good in there for me. And I just love hearing it. So I really thank you for getting your voice out there. It's so funny how I found you, like this random series of events, and I'm so glad I did. But most the most stimulating, interesting people I find in life are by chance. So I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you so much, and I'm so glad that you found me. And great questions, great conversation, and it is pure joy for me to be able to have conversations with other people, especially in the podcasting world, and knowing what everyone out there, everyone is doing out there. So yeah, no, I'm really grateful that you asked me. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click the stop button.